Subaru is a company discovering that the traditional rules of car building just aren't valid any longer. Customers are demanding more adventurous products that cost less to run and offer new levels of style, safety and versatility. Which is why the brand's XV crossover model is so key for its future. It moves Subaru firmly into the here and now and is these days more affordably priced than any of its key rivals. Some of these might seem more polished, but most lack this car's level of all-round capability, something you'll appreciate in more ways than you might think. The crossover. Arguably, it's the motor industry's fastest growing market segment, and in Subaru's XV, that's exactly what we have here. Now by now you're probably familiar with the concept behind this kind of car, but even if you're not, you're probably well acquainted with the end result. Whether packaged as a Ford Kuga, a Peugeot 3008, or most successfully as a Nissan Qashqai, the idea is the same. A family hatchback with SUV attitude and none of the clunky connotations associated with Freelander-style small 4x4s. Virtually none of the off-roading capability either, or the solid toughness. Some crossovers don't even bother with a four-wheel drive option, and those that do limit it to ridiculously pricey derivatives. Crossovers, in other words, are these days more about fashion than substance. But what if you could get one with Qashqai-like style matched to Freelander-like off-road capability? What if this class of car, in other words, could actually walk the walk as well as talk the talk? That'd be quite something. That'd be unique. And that's exactly what this XV claims to be designed to deliver. If any brand was going to create a car able to do this, you'd put money on Subaru to do it. They were building models of this kind way before the concept became fashionable, with a history going all the way back to 1995 and the launch of the legacy Outback, a chunky all-wheel drive estate, then followed by more overtly SUV-like Forester and Tribeca designs, none of which really caught the imagination of British buyers. But this car might. Already one of Subaru's strongest sellers following the introduction of super affordable pricing and a breath of fresh air amongst prissier models in this segment. Let's check it out. Crossover models as a breed are all about what they say. The raised driving position, the plastic body cladding, the big wheels, and not a lot else. Subaru as a brand doesn't hold with that. Here's a company that cares about what its cars can actually do as well as the school-run statement they make, with the result that this XV is far more capable than most buyers will expect. It does, in short, offer a different approach to the Qashqai and Kuga norm in this segment, something you get a feel for from the very moment you slip behind the wheel. From the engine note, you know you're in a Subaru, thanks to the charismatic, flat, thrumming Boxer beat. Both of the mainstream four-cylinder power plants on offer use the Boxer configuration, one in which the cylinders lay flat and whiz back and forth like a boxer's fists. There's a single petrol option, a 148 brake horsepower 2-litre unit available with either a 6-speed manual gearbox or a 6-speed Lineatronic CVT automatic. Most UK buyers though will opt for the 145 brake horsepower manual only 2-litre diesel model that I'm trying here. So how does it fare on the road? Well, for a start, the driving position is extremely good with decent adjustment of both the seat and the steering wheel. The windscreen pillars are refreshingly slim, although the rear three-quarter view will have many relying on the parking sensors when nudging it into a parking bay. Get beyond the city limits and give the throttle a good prod and you're rewarded with a nice gravelly thrum from this 2-litre diesel. The 62 is dispatched in 9.3 seconds on the way to 120 miles an hour. Thanks to 350 Newton meters of torque, there's reasonable pulling power through the sweet shifting 6-speed gearbox too, if not quite as much as is provided by some comparable rivals. And around the twisty stuff, Well, I'd had reasonable hopes here, given Subaru's claims that thanks to the way the Boxer engine can sit very low in the car, this model can boast the lowest centre of gravity in the segment, which ought to make it very taut around the corners. Now that might be true in theory, but it doesn't feel that way the first time you throw the XV into a tight bend. The raised driving position makes the car feel a little precarious, but stick with it and you'll find plenty of grip. In fact, the more you drive it, the more confident you get, and it actually becomes good fun. Or would be if the electric power steering offered a bit more feel. Right, we can't put it off any longer. It's time to do what most XV owners will never do, and take the thing off-road. Something this car is better equipped for than any of its crossover rivals, thanks to standard symmetrical four-wheel drive on all models and 220mm of ground clearance, 30mm more than you get in a Nissan Qashqai and more even than a Land Rover Freelander. Not that you'll be taking on the Rubicon Trail. A 19.6 degree approach angle means really steep head-on inclines might be beyond you. And of course, like all crossovers, this one lacks proper off-roading mechanicals like a low-range transfer box or lockable individual axle diffs. But unless you're somewhere you really shouldn't have gone to in the first place with your XV, then you won't really need any of that sort of stuff anyway. A manual car like this one distributes its torque equally, 50-50 front to rear, with a viscous coupling to change that balance whenever a front wheel or a rear wheel slips. It's as pure a four-wheel drive system as you could possibly hope for, and it just works, even when only one wheel has traction. There's also a neat hill start assist system which prevents the car rolling backwards when you're beginning on a sharp incline. All XVs get a very clever VDC stability control system, which comes in very handy if you forget quite how muddy your tyres are, and you can switch it off if you want the kind of momentum maintaining wheel spin that'll get you through really slippery sections. Of course, if you're a typical crossover customer, then you might be wondering whether this kind of capability is really necessary. I suppose the answer to that is that it's like having a watch that's waterproof to 200 meters. You'll probably never need it, but it's good to know it's there. The XV's basic shape is a fairly faithful representation of the crossover norm, but it's got a purposeful, chunky stance and some very interesting details. The front end is very neatly finished with shapely headlamp pods, a gaping air intake below the number plate and a recognisable Subaru grille. Moving back, you get these Audi all-road style wheel arch extensions that look agreeably rugged, and at the back end, this tidily finished rear bumper with dark cladding extending back from the rear wheel arch. You lose a lot of the contrast if you go for a dark paint shade, so choose your colour carefully. Inside, the cabin is a step up from the rather plasticky efforts that Subaru has managed in recent years, but it still doesn't quite have the quality feel you'd find in the best of this car's European rivals. Some of the ergonomics are a little haphazard too. There are lots of fiddly little buttons on the steering wheel, and the seat heater switches are hidden away behind the handbrake. There's some compensation though to be found in the way it's all screwed together, which matches the rugged, built-to-last feeling that pervades across the rest of the car. There are some nice details too, like the way the heater controls are large and chunky enough to be used by a gloved hand, and the way that the USB and aux-in points are neatly stashed away in the closable compartment between the seats. Accessibility to the back is helped by doors that open wider than those fitted to many competitor models. Once inside, Subaru talks of room for 3 adults, but the high centre transmission tunnel will make that difficult to achieve on all but the shortest journeys. It'll be fine for 3 children though. On the plus side, the XV's comparatively long wheelbase gives a decent amount of rear legroom, the space available helped by front seats that you can get your feet comfortably under. Out back, the 380 litre boot capacity is a little less than most rivals offer, but you do get this useful underfloor compartment, and of course you can push forward the 60/40 split folding rear seat back if you need more space. Now when you do, it doesn't fold quite flat, but you do get a useful 1,270 litres of total fresh air. So what will you pay for one of these? Well, the XV's now a lot more affordable than you might expect, pitched in the £22,000 to £28,000 bracket, with most mainstream models firmly angled towards the lower end of that spectrum. There's a £2,000 premium to go from a 2-litre petrol model to an equivalently specified 2-litre diesel. Choose the petrol variant and there's a £1,500 option of the Lineartronic automatic gearbox. As for rivals, well, essentially what Subaru's now much sharper pricing means in the crossover segment is that you can get yourself a 4-wheel drive XV for the same money or even less than an equivalently powerful 2-wheel drive Peugeot 3008 or Nissan Qashqai. This Subaru can easily undercut a comparable all-wheel drive Ford Kuga on price too. Plus, because it's more capable than the average crossover class contender off-road, you could also reasonably compare it to soft-roading lifestyle SUVs like Land Rover's Freelander, Toyota's RAV4, Honda's CR-V and Volkswagen's Tiguan. Cars that'll cost you several £1,000s more than this one. Despite that, all XV models offer plenty for your money. So even on entry-level variants, the kit list runs to 17-inch alloy wheels, front fog lamps, wiper de-icers, heated power mirrors, daytime LED running lights, a 4-speaker CD stereo, heated front seats, automatic air conditioning, and a dash-top multifunction display. Most will opt for a mid-spec model like this one, with features like cruise control, HID headlights, a rear-view camera, a stereo upgrade, Bluetooth, USB and iPod connectivity, some leather bits inside and colour-coded parts outside, and tinted privacy glass. Safety-wise, there are the usual front, side, curtain and knee airbags, plus the normal electronic aids for braking, traction and stability control to hopefully ensure that you'll never have to use them. Plus, bear in mind the fact that the XV's all-wheel drive system is permanent rather than the kind of on-demand setup that most rivals use. That could be important in a slippery situation where you need the car to react quickly. Whilst we're on this subject, it's worth noting that the XV received a 5-star Euro NCAP crash safety rating. So what, I hear you say, doesn't every new car these days? What's a bit different here is the breakdown of the test scores. This car scored high marks in all 4 categories tested, but registered 90% in the child occupant category, amongst the best of any car on sale in the UK, and also scored maximum points for its protection of 18-month-old infants, with the XV's side impact protection singled out for specific praise. With most crossover vehicles being bought by families, this is something to seriously think about when coming to a sensible, measured decision about which car to buy. Now, it's fair to say that Subaru weren't exactly quick out of the blocks when it came to driving down the cost of vehicle ownership. Their first diesel engine only arrived in 2008, but since then the company has rapidly been making up for lost time. The diesel engine has been tweaked and teased to lower emissions and improve fuel economy, and a new generation of petrol power plants is doing much to banish Subaru's old reputation for being rather fond of a drink. So, what's changed? Factors such as a lighter body shell, better aerodynamics, the adoption of a new CVT auto gearbox, all of those have certainly contributed to the incremental improvements in efficiency, as has the introduction of an auto start-stop function to cut the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. Probably the biggest win has come in reducing this Subaru's weight, which has huge benefits in terms of economy and emissions. To put it into perspective, an XV with 2 12-stone blokes on board would still weigh less than an entry-level Qashqai. opt, as most customers will, for the XV diesel, and you'll be getting a car that can return a combined fuel economy figure of 50.4 miles to the gallon and will emit 146 grams per kilometre of carbon dioxide. Go for the petrol 2-litre model and you'll attain the best figures with the CVT gearbox. With this auto-fitted, you'll get a best of 42.8 miles to the gallon and 153 grams per kilometre in auto form. The manual manages 40.9 miles to the gallon and 160 grams per kilometre. So it's time to lay the legend of the fearsomely thirsty Subaru to rest at last. A decently sized 60-litre fuel tank gives all models a useful touring range, some 660 miles if you go for the diesel. And all but the least expensive XV models get an eco meter in the multifunction display that helps you optimise your driving efficiency over time. Residual values certainly aren't going to be on a par with BMW and Audi, but they'll be quite up to the level of, say, Peugeot or Ford, maybe even better. Subaru is certainly committed to doing what it can to make the ownership experience as painless as possible. To that end, you get a comprehensive 5-year, 125,000 mile warranty that's one of the best in the industry. Here's a car that makes more sense the more you think about it. It may not be quite as flashy as some other segment rivals, but there's plenty else to like. Pricing changes have now made it excellent value. Then there's the standard 4-wheel drive system, the brilliant build quality, the lovely charismatic boxer engines, and this car's surprising off-road ability. Then add in high equipment levels, class-leading safety, and it's quite brilliant after-sales care package. Starting to look rather tempting now, isn't it? Okay, so no, it's not perfect. Ride and refinement could be better, the interior isn't the last word in design elegance, and the boot could be bigger. But these aren't deal breakers, and they can't begin to dilute the XV's many virtues. Subaru, it seems on this evidence, is a company that hasn't quite got the hang of the whole style over substance thing when it comes to crossover models of this kind. And I, for one, am quite glad of it.